Good evening, everybody. I'm your host, Aaron Becker, and I am joined by the great Derek Bell, DB, tonight. Both of us getting a promotion to the active roster here in week 6 with Joe Morrison and Alan Saunders on the bench tonight, but very happy to be here. How about you, DB?
Absolutely. Yeah. Ready to talk some ball, man. It's nice to get the call up, try to feel important, try to see if we can be affordable and applicable replacements to Job and to Allen.
I like it. I like it. Well, let's just jump right into this thing. Steelers coming off their bye week. So not too much has gone on in Steelers news the past week, but a lot has gone on in the AFC North. And I would say it was a pretty good bye week for the Steelers with everyone else losing in the division. They now hold a nice little lead in the division at a 3-1 record, first place. And the Browns, who are their week 6 opponent here, getting active this week and trading Joe Flacco to the division rival Cincinnati Bengals. What do you make of this move?
Oh, what a strange move, man. The funniest thing about it is I saw someone post a picture of Joe Flacco in like a Browns and then a Bengals uniform, and it also had a picture of like him in a Ravens uniform. Flacco has now played for so many teams that him in a Ravens uniform looks weird to me. And I think that tells you all you need to know about how like the last like 7 or 8 years of Flacco's career has been. Flacco was really struggling in Cleveland, and that's like, it was not a surprise to me whatsoever that they had to turn to Dillon Gabriel, especially you invest a 3rd-round pick. You got to see what the kid can do. If the veteran is not hitting throws down the field or taking care of the football that well, in my opinion, I think it's just better to give the young kids a shot. And, whether this means anything for the Bengals, I don't know. Jake Browning was playing pretty terribly. Of course, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins can make a lot of guys look, respectable under center, you would think. But, man, like, I would just say the Bengals on both sides of the football for basically the entirety of this season have just looked like a non-functional unit. So yeah, it's good to be a Steelers fan for sure. And then I know you're familiar with the Ravens. Like, it's like the walking and wounded over there in Baltimore as well. So the Steelers really sitting pretty after 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think that the return that the Browns kind of got and what the Bengals had to give up, was kind of underwhelming, right? I mean, I know you said Joe Flacco not playing really well start this season, but I would still consider him an upgrade over how Jake Browning was playing for the Bengals. And so It's really just an odd move for the Browns to kind of help a division rival like that without getting anything really that significant in return. But
yeah, I kind of wonder too if like Flacco maybe didn't like request a trade, but given the fact that he's like a veteran, he's been around the block, probably really respected in that organization, especially because they brought him back a second time. I wonder if it was like one of those things where they approached him as like, hey, like, we think there may be some interest here. Would you like to go somewhere else and play, or do you kind of just want to hang out here as a backup? And I'm sure that Flacco, like, for whatever reason, he does not want to go be a family man. Like, he wants to play football for better or worse. So,
well, very, very clearly. Well, there'll be plenty to talk about Joe Flacco next week, but we'll leave that for Job and Allen, since that'll be Cincinnati Bengals week 7. So let's kind of gear things back towards the Steelers here and the offensive side of the ball. I put out, a little tweet before the show, see what people wanted us to talk about. And of course, wide receiver came up right away with everyone, right? So the Steelers been kind of looking for that second receiver since trading George Pickens this offseason. And now they're even down a man potentially with Calvin Austin getting injured in Dublin, Ireland in week 4. So the big question is, who's going to take over for him? Like yourself and I getting promoted to the active roster tonight. Are we going to see a guy like Isaiah Hodgins maybe get that promotion this week against Cleveland?
Yeah, I mean, Hodgins is interesting. Another team that I thought could potentially use Hodgins is the Giants. The Giants are like, they have some injuries at the receiver position, and like, he's obviously familiar with Daboll and that staff. That's where he had like the most success that he's had in his pro career. So I would be surprised if they tried to poach Hodgins. But I think, Mike Tomlin alluded to the fact that, Scotty Miller, Roman Wilson potentially going to see some increased volume. Of course, we know like Ben Skowronek got a good amount of playing time last week when they went into some of their 12 heavy looks. But I'm sure it's going to be like a mix and match thing. But there is a potential to where like they could ride the hot hand too. I think if Roman Wilson gets the chance, if Calvin Austin misses these next 2 games over the next 10 days, Roman Wilson comes out and plays really well, he'll earn himself some more playing time. I think that's probably how that'll go. But I definitely don't think it's going to be one of those things where, Roman comes in and is the starter this week to where he's playing, 80, 90% of the snaps. I very much think it'll be kind of a collection of guys trying to fill that void.
Another name that has recently come up, I believe James brought this up, is the name Treylon Burks. He kind of made his way through waivers today, unclaimed. He's out, former first-round receiver. Very disappointing from his draft capital that was invested in him and just his time in Tennessee. But do you think that's a name that the Steelers could maybe kind of check out now that he's healthy and on the free agent market?
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, draft pedigree does get you a long way in this league, right? Like the Steelers actually brought in Isaiah Simmons, who was a former top 10 pick, in for a visit today, I think, or a workout. So, I mean, being a first-round pick gives you a lot of leeway in the league. I would say the thing with Burks, I know that he hasn't performed up to the draft capital that the Titans spent on him. The other thing is that he just has not been able to stay healthy. Like, it's really unfortunate how snake bitten he's been with injuries. It's just been one thing after another his entire career. But I mean, I definitely wouldn't be completely against, adding him to the equation here, just because, like, it's what else do you got to lose, honestly, especially as like a practice squad addition, somebody with a little upside. Maybe you can get him in a role here. The thing with Burks that I liked coming out of college was, this is a long time ago now, it's just, he had that kind of like power slot element. It was pretty good with the ball in his hands. He could work those two-way goes. I always thought that putting him outside as like an X, like the Titans tried to do originally early on in his career, was a little bit misguided. I think they looked at him as a body type and said that, okay, that's A.J. Brown. And that's really not what he was coming out of Arkansas. So, hopefully he lands back on his feet. I don't know if the Steelers are going to make a move or not. There are some potential guys out there maybe available, like another guy, Jacoby Myers with the Raiders, struggling a ton really to start the season. I think he could potentially be a name to watch at the trade deadline. But, it wouldn't surprise me if the Steelers made a move, but I don't know how much of a hurry they'll be in to do that.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be in very much of a hurry either. And like you said, a guy like Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller are definitely two guys I think they're going to be much more involved this coming Sunday. And Roman Wilson, I mean, 1 catch, 7 yards through the first 4 weeks of the season. And Mike Tomlin was asked recently about, his limited role in the offense and why it has been that way. And he pretty much said it's just kind of been based on the personnel packages that they've been using. And, that's why I think he could certainly get some more playing time this week and see if he can finally live up to that 3rd-round draft capital. But at the same time, I think this is going to be very much a trenches type of game, right, against the Cleveland Browns. They have a pretty good defensive line there. And, it's AFC North football at the end of the day. And so I think the tight ends are going to continue to play a really, really big role in this game. Are there certain players along the Steelers offensive line or tight ends that you kind of have your eye on this week that could really be an X factor that not a lot of people are talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tomlin was pretty open about the inclusion of Darnell Washington. We saw him get a ton of reps this past game against the Vikings. He alluded to the fact that, with Cleveland having some bigger edge defenders, not just Myles Garrett, but Isaiah McGuire is like a really, really stout dude too, really well built, kind of low to the ground. But, those guys are a little bit bigger. I think that you'll see Washington get more run. And then, like you alluded to, just the way that they're using the personnel kind of explains like why certain guys are getting playing time and others are not, maybe as much as people may have anticipated coming into the season. Like the Steelers, in terms of like their personnel usage, they're playing 12 personnel on 46% of the snaps. That's the second highest usage rate in the league. And then 11 personnel is 39% of the snaps. That's 30th. So it's just like there's not a lot of times where the Steelers actually have 3 wide receivers out there on the field. So it's just there's only so many snaps and so many targets to kind of go around. The big thing for me is, I think anytime you play against the Cleveland Browns, it's just about having a good plan for what you're going to do with Myles Garrett. Now, is that just, parking Darnell Washington beside Broderick and just saying like, all right, we're going to force somebody else to beat us up front and we're fine with dedicating 2 guys to 1 rusher. I think that that's a smarter and more sound plan than, just asking Broderick to go one-on-one or, letting them move Garrett around because they'll do that a little bit as well. But, the Cleveland pass rush in general has been has been pretty solid this year. A guy that's had like a fantastic season to kind of start the season has been Malik Collins, who's been a journeyman. Like, he's played for a bunch of different teams now. He's always been a talented player, but maybe never been, I guess as consistent as he's been to start this season. But you look at some of the numbers. I mean, he's got 17 total pressures, 4 combined sacks, according to Pro Football Focus. He's just getting into the backfield these last couple of weeks. I really feel like when you pop on their film, he's flashing everywhere, and has been a really good kind of partner in crime to Garrett. So definitely, some challenges up front dealing with Cleveland.
Yeah, I think the Steelers are definitely going to need some help in the pass protection this week, because I think it's going to be very difficult for them to run against Cleveland. Cleveland has one of the best run defenses in the NFL. And yeah, I know, Kenneth Gainwell is coming off a probably career best performance in Dublin.
Absolutely.
That hot hand. But I think it's going to be a little bit tough sledding for him. And obviously you have Jalen Warren, who's working his way back from his injury as well, who I think is probably going to play this Sunday as well. How do you think with Gainwell coming off that big game, do you think the snap share will kind of be even, or do you think that's Jalen's running back one role when he comes back?
Yeah, I think it's probably Jalen's, he's going to be the lead back whenever he gets back. I mean, you mentioned like Cleveland's numbers and stopping the runs, 33.6% rushing success rate. Really, the team that had, I would say, probably the most success, at least in the games that I watched, was Detroit. But even then, like, Cleveland was getting like stuffs. It was just Gibbs had a couple of really special runs where, he was able to break some explosives. That's one thing that the Steelers, need to try to continue to seek out, is finding explosive plays on offense, whether it be on the ground or through the air. But yeah, I mean, Gainwell is just, I thought last week against the Vikings, I thought he played extremely well, man. Just the way that he would, like, his vision, thought he was creating well on his own. I thought he was patient, finding the right cutback lanes, and, just the change up, I thought, getting Darnell Washington more involved, Spencer Anderson, knowing that the Vikings like to play a little bit more too high, getting really heavy and kind of playing into those tendencies. I thought it was really inspired coaching and a good game plan from Arthur Smith. The Cleveland situation is a little bit different because, I think a lot of people associate Flores with like just tons of disguise and like you never know what you're going to get. And even though I think some of that can be a little bit maybe over exaggerated, but, with Jim Schwartz and the Browns, like, what you're going to get every time. Like, they're going to, play man coverage across the board, and they're going to say like, all right, your guys are going to have to beat our guys. And then we're going to rely on our pass rushers to kind of, get after the passer, and they're going to, stop the run on the way to the pass, I think is like Jim Schwartz's kind of motto. So it's a very different stylistic defense that's going to call for, I think, a very different like game plan specifically on offense.
Well, I think you and I can both agree that Darnell Washington is going to continue to play a pretty large role in the Steelers offense, especially Sunday. But a guy in that tight end room who hasn't really had the season that a lot of people expected is Pat Freiermuth. 7 catches, 65 yards, 0 touchdowns through the first 4 weeks of the season. It really has been a curious case of Pat Freiermuth so far this season. I think a lot of people were excited to see the rapport between him and Aaron Rodgers, but that really hasn't been there. Why do you think that is the case?
It's interesting. I think there have definitely been a couple of times where you look at it and say that, all right, these two guys like don't really have that strong of a rapport just yet. It's only been 5 games, so you kind of have to leave the light on for those things to change as well. But I also don't think that Freiermuth has been maybe as effective in isolation this year in terms of like getting open. I also think that the Steelers have kind of just ran into a little bit of an issue with like personnel. I think that their idea when trading for Jonnu Smith is that they were going to be able to live in those 12 personnel sets, and that would be the ways that they kind of mask some of their deficiencies at the receiver position. That just hasn't really come to fruition. Like, you look at some of the numbers, like when both of those guys have been on the field together, the Steelers are only averaging 2.9 yards per play. Like, anything below 4 or anything really below like 4.5 is like, you're in the basement. So they just haven't really been that good. And part of it's because like, when you play 12 personnel, like one of those guys has to block an edge rusher. And that's like kind of what Mike Tomlin was alluding to a little bit in his press conference, is that neither one of those guys are necessarily like true inline Y tight ends. They're more like movable F pieces. And, it's difficult to play both those guys at the same time. And, I honestly, I think a lot of people are wondering, how this is going to shake out long term and everything. I honestly don't know how they're going to get good return on investment with both of those guys, given their contracts. It almost feels like a situation where it's kind of like a two birds, one stone type of thing. And I know they're trying to avoid that, but we'll see what happens. I think the bye week hopefully, brought about some thoughtful conversations about different ways that you can get those guys involved. But I think it really starts on gaining the trust and being on the same page with the quarterback, which, him and Pat and Rodgers haven't been on the same page a couple times this season.
Do you think if that continues, Freiermuth could be a trade deadline candidate? I mean, if him and Rodgers continue to struggle and you continue to see guys like Darnell Washington and Jonnu Smith in that tight end room continue to carve out large roles in this offense, and Pat Freiermuth is kind of the odd man out, is he kind of a surprise trade deadline candidate for the Steelers?
I don't know if, first off, that wouldn't be what I would do personally. If I had to deal one of them, even if all things were considered, I think Freiermuth is a better player. I think some people would disagree with after the numbers that Jonnu put up last year with Miami. Granted, there's a lot of context that kind of needs to be added there. I think Freiermuth's a better player than Smith. The other portion about that is, he's also like 3-4 years younger, I think. So that would kind of factor into the decision on like if I needed to move on for one and eat some dead cap or something like that. That's what I would take into account, knowing that the Steelers, I think they're going to make the playoffs this season, but I don't know that I'm definitely not ready to consider them like a true contender. And I don't know that we'll get that answer for another couple of weeks until they start playing some better competition. So, I mean, if I had to trade one, I would probably go with trading Jonnu, but I don't know how the team feels about that. So to your point, if it is one of those situations where it's like, all right, we tried this, it didn't work, we need to try to recoup some draft capital, or maybe if there's a player for player trade. I mean, you always say that those things are incredibly rare, but the Steelers did get a player for player trade to acquire Jonnu. Like they traded Minkah Fitzpatrick away to get Ramsey and Smith. So we'll see if there's something out there. I mean, I know there's teams out there that would definitely like to have Freiermuth or Smith to their tight end room.
Absolutely. Well, let's flip things to the other side of the ball. I think we've spent enough time on the offense. Like I said, this game is going to be a game of the trenches, and the Browns have a pretty good rookie running back in Quinshon Judkins, their second-round pick out of the 2025 NFL Draft. I think Steelers fans are pretty familiar with him. I know he was linked to Pittsburgh a lot through the pre-draft process this offseason, but Cleveland nabbing him in the beginning portions of the second round, and he has looked like the real deal since returning to the field. What's going to be the key to stopping this kid, and really what makes him so special with an offensive line like Cleveland's?
I think Cleveland's been really leaning into like more of a downhill rushing attack in terms of more like getting more gap scheme stuff going. I think it really plays into like what Judkins does the best. I think the number one thing that you saw coming out of Ohio State was just his physicality. I mean, the dude like loves contact, and he's really well built. He's like 220 pounds. But you look at some of the numbers, right? Like he's averaging 4.8 yards per carry. He's already broke 11 tackles. And I think one of the things that he probably, not getting into like the off the field stuff, right? But just like strictly like if we're just evaluating on field performance, the guy who, he didn't practice, like he was away from the team up until like a month ago when he was like cleared of all his stuff. And we didn't know like when he was going to come out and see, but I think the conditioning element has been really impressive to me. I mean, he comes out, first week, I think he gets 10 carries, and it's 18, 21, 23. I mean, we don't see a lot of running backs in today's NFL go out there and get 20, 23 carries anymore. Like normally you got these like timeshares, and they even drafted another guy that I like quite a bit, Dylan Sampson. So we'll see what that looks like. But I think the number one thing is just getting as many hats to the ball as you possibly can. Like Judkins is a guy, like he's going to go through contact and he wants to run through people. So just making sure you're getting as many people to him as possible. And I think one of the things that Steelers defense needs to improve upon coming out of the bye week is just tackling technique more than anything else. Like going into the bye, I think they had the 4th or 5th worst missed tackle percentage in the NFL. That was kind of leading to some of the explosive plays on the ground that they've given up. So, that's going to be definitely a point of emphasis, even with Dylan Gabriel, like making a second career start.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you kind of pointed me right into the next question here. With that Steelers run defense, they kind of struggled in the early portions of the year and kind of had some inside linebacker changes in personnel and who they were playing, and even bringing in a guy like Jawan Bentley, who's really known to be a run stuffer. But some surprising news: the Steelers moving on from him. Why do you think that was the case? I mean, with a guy like Malik Harrison still on IR, what's your take on the Steelers moving on from Bentley this week?
It almost feels like the Steelers were kind of doing some things early in those first couple of weeks to kind of almost send a message to Peyton Wilson, who didn't play well early in the early portions of the season, but
Yeah.
kind of, I think that giving some of his snaps away to Cole Holcomb almost woke him up a little bit. In addition to them making some changes schematically, more run blitzing, some slanting on like early downs, trying to make sure we get those linebackers downhill as quickly as possible, not asking them necessarily to read as much at the second level or give those linemen time to get up and climb on them. It's just one of those things where it's okay, you see the ball, go get the ball. And I think that's really where Peyton does his best work, and he's played better over the past couple of weeks. So it just might be one of those things where, it's either a numbers crunch or they felt like they needed special teams help by signing like Windman or something like that. But I think more than anything else, like, the Steelers want Peyton Wilson to be the inside linebacker too. Like, they don't want a rotation next to Patrick Queen. Like, they wanted him to take that big step in year two. And I think that just over the past couple of weeks, like, he's trended in the right direction, and they're going to give him every opportunity to succeed before looking at other, avenues. I feel like Bentley is a guy who I think as a thumper, like on early downs, can definitely still play and will probably have opportunities elsewhere. And, if you don't feel like you're going to give him the chance to get a helmet, probably better off for both parties to kind of go their separate ways.
I agree. All right. Well, Quinshon Judkins and the Browns run game is certainly going to have a really big impact on this game. But I think you got to look at the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, right? Third round rookie Dylan Gabriel just made his first NFL start last week against the Minnesota Vikings for the Browns. The Browns did lose that game 21-17, but Gabriel looked pretty good, completing 19 of 33 passes, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, the interceptions. You know, how much do you think this Browns team is kind of going to let him sling it versus maybe continuing to lean on that run game, especially in a divisional game like this?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because when you look at the film from last week, there's a lot of kind of messiness to their offense. And I don't know how much you can actually put on the quarterback for that. Like, a lot of plays where guys don't really seemingly like know their assignments. I do think with Gabriel, like, a couple things like kind of stood out under right away. Really is like the underneath accuracy. Like, the dude will. He like kind of embodies the phrase of like, you can't go broke taking a profit. And I think that was really what you saw in like his first game. Like, the ball was coming out pretty quickly, which, is always a good thing, especially when you're behind an offensive line that's not really all that great. You look at some of the underneath numbers in this game. He was 13 of 13 under 10 air yards from 0 to 10 air yards. So just the accuracy underneath was good. I thought that he did some good things in terms of like pocket navigation, and then the decision making. Like, I don't think there was only like one just like kind of murky decision that he made. And for a rookie, like making his first NFL start, I think you definitely got to take that. I do still think like, and this is really just based on more of like my evaluation of Gabriel coming out of Oregon, but there are limitations with Gabriel just in terms of like his arm. I think that, NFL windows, like, he doesn't have the arm to really like, missile balls into tight spaces or anything like that. Like, he's gonna try to win like above the neck and like with accuracy. I just don't know like what the ceiling to that sort of player is. That's why like I probably personally wouldn't have drafted him in the third round. But as like a backup who, even for, he threw 2 touchdowns like in his first ever game. Like, I don't think he's going to be such a detriment to their cause. Like, he's probably not going to lose the game for you. So really it's about, trying to get them in long down and distance situations, because they still have some issues at the tackle spots where the Steelers are going to have a huge talent advantage up front.
Well, one player the Steelers aren't probably going to have in their secondary to defend Gabriel and the Browns pass attack is Jalen Ramsey, who also got injured in Dublin, Ireland. the Steelers looks like they're going to get back Joey Porter Jr., but Jalen Ramsey, he's kind of played that versatile role in their secondary, playing really a little bit of everywhere. Without having him and his presence on their defense this week, how much does that limit them on that side of the ball?
It'll be interesting to see because the Browns are playing a lot of 12 personnel, but their second tight end that they're bringing in is Harold Fannin, who's like more of a receiver first. Like he's played a little bit of H-back too. So I would have kind of just been curious on like what the Steelers were going to do to match that personnel wise. You mentioned getting Joey Porter back. That's going to be nice to have him on the outside, but really the Browns passing game, that's really not like their strength. Their strength is like, the tight ends, like having Njoku and having Fannin. Even Jerry Jeudy, I feel like, has always been somebody who's kind of best as like a movable piece. Like he can go inside, he can go outside, kind of a guy that can make some splash plays, coming off a really good season last year. But I think the Steelers are going to have more than enough of what they need in the back end to kind of defend Cleveland. I think Brandon Echols has been a really good signing for them. He's shown to be like versatile, to be able to play inside and out, like, be somebody that they can rely on even when they play man coverage. I really just think more than anything else, like to watch out for Stefanski when he's went into these games with, I'm going to call Gabriel a backup just because he was a backup until a week ago. But like whenever he's went into these Steelers-Browns games without like the advantage at quarterback, we'll just call it that, he's really leaned on like the quick passing attack in addition to like some of their run game stuff. So they're going to try to get the ball out quickly. So you got to make sure that you're trying to minimize the effects of that. I'm hopeful that the Steelers will be ready for that game plan.
All right. Well, can't get out of this one without getting your score prediction. Now, on paper, I think the Steelers feel pretty good about themselves. I think a lot of their fans feel pretty good going into this game, but Cleveland has kind of proven to be a trap game from time to time for Pittsburgh. Now, this is going to be in the comforts of their own stadium. But how do you think this one plays out?
I like the Steelers. I said this a couple of days ago, just like watching the games at home. Like, I think the Steelers should win each of these next two games by multiple scores. I don't think it's going to be as easy as it probably should be, but the Steelers are more talented than the Browns. They're more talented than the Bengals. And I think that even the next week's game, where it being a divisional game, like on the road, even though I think that the Browns right now are probably a better team than the Bengals, I think that one probably worries me a little bit more just because the travel element, like playing on a weird schedule, that's always kind of strange. But I like the Steelers in this one. I'll say 20-13 or something like that. Something to that fair. So
I like it. I'm right there with you. I got the Steelers in this one. I'm going to go 23-16. I think there's going to be some field goals in there. I think Boswell is going to be a little bit more involved than he was
busy
in week 4. Yes, absolutely. Usually is in these divisional matchups. And before we get out of here, like I said, they are coming off this early bye week. They now have 13 straight games to finish out the regular season here. Obviously, health is going to be a big factor, but what do you think is going to be the biggest thing that kind of determines the success over this 13-game stretch now?
Yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up like just the injury luck element. Like you can look at like just how things have changed across the NFL landscape, just in terms of injuries, like all these different quarterbacks getting hurt and things like that. You got to take that into account. So staying healthy would be number one. But I just think best way I could sum it up is just like the continual, evolution on both sides of the ball, like trying to find answers week to week, and continually improving. I think for the passing or for the offense, it's probably more so about, trying to evolve and figure out a way to get some more explosives. I don't know that they are going to be like a top 10 unit just because of the talent that they've got on the roster, but can they be a little bit more, versatile in terms of throwing the ball down the field? And then I would say on the defensive side of the ball, just continually to find answers to kind of mask some of their deficiencies. And, I would say that, hopefully we see a little bit more disguise and things of that nature. But you got to get some guys back healthy. And I think getting Jalen back, hopefully in the next, couple of weeks, at least, hopefully will be a good thing and kind of a start to setting those things in motion.
Yeah, one thing I'm going to be certainly watching over the next 13 weeks is the continual development of that young offensive line.
Yeah,
Lot,
absolutely. Good
lot of
shout.
investment in that offensive line over the last few years here. There's been some ups and downs, but you kind of expect that with the group. But they're learning
Hmm.
together, growing together, and if that group can, finish out this 13 weeks pretty strong, I think a lot of people are going to feel a lot better about placing a rookie quarterback behind it next
100%.
year. So, yeah, it was a great time talking here on Steelers Night Shift with you, DB. Tell the people where they can find you.
Absolutely, man. It was a blast. Yep, at Steelers_DB on Twitter and YouTube. You can find all my written work at SteelersNow.com.
And you can find all my work at SteelersNow.com as well, and follow me at Aaron_M_Becker. Thanks for clocking in with us. It was fun with DB and I clocking in here, and thanks for joining us. And catch Job and Alan most likely back here next Wednesday night.